Introduction. Think fast, speak with power. The skill that changes your life. Thinking fast before speaking is not a common skill, but it completely transforms the way you communicate, connect, and build influence. It's not about having automatic responses or sounding smarter than others. It's about something deeper. Having full control of your thoughts in the moments when most people react without thinking. True power lies in that space between what you think and what you say. Whoever masters that instant masters their words. And whoever masters their words masters their world. It's no coincidence that the most respected, influential, and admired people are not those who speak the fastest, but those who speak with intention, clarity, and inner strength. Speaking well begins long before you open your mouth. It starts in your mind. It begins with agile, focused, and conscious thinking. We live in a time where speaking quickly is often mistaken for intelligence. But true intelligence lies in choosing carefully what to say, how to say it, and when to say it. So many opportunities are lost simply because we don't know how to pause. Because we don't take a breath before responding. Because we don't give ourselves a fraction of a second to organize a thought, an emotion, a truth. Thinking fast is not the same as speaking fast. Thinking fast means having a trained mind that can detect what matters, discard what doesn't, and choose words that create impact. It's the skill that turns a casual conversation into an opportunity, a criticism into a lesson, a conflict into a connection. Learning to think before speaking isn't just a communication technique. It's a mental transformation. It requires stepping out of autopilot, resisting the impulse to react, letting go of the need to always have the last word. It demands training your mind to be a filter, not a loudspeaker. Because when you think before you speak, you can build or destroy. You can calm or ignite. You can persuade or confuse. Every word is a seed. And when you master the art of thinking clearly, those seeds become fruit. Confidence, respect, credibility, opportunity. What you're about to learn in this audiobook is not a collection of catchy phrases or empty advice. It's a deep, practical mental training so that you can turn your mind into your greatest ally when it's time to speak. Imagine for a moment that you can respond intelligently, even under pressure. Imagine having the ability to speak calmly even when you're being attacked. Imagine that every time you open your mouth, your words carry direction, coherence, and power. That is the reality of those who master this art. They weren't born with a special gift. They developed it. They trained it. They built it through awareness, practice, and commitment. Because this skill doesn't depend on your education level, your environment, or even your personality. It depends on your decision to think differently. To observe yourself in every interaction. To ask yourself before speaking, will what I'm about to say build or destroy? Does it reflect what I truly want to communicate? Is it aligned with my values, my intentions, my purpose? Speaking with power is not the same as speaking loudly. It's about speaking from the center. From a mind that is not scattered or ruled by emotion, but from a place of lucid presence. And that can only be achieved by developing fast thinking as an inner skill, like a muscle that activates exactly when you need it most. In this audiobook, you won't find tricks to impress people or lines to manipulate conversations. What you'll learn here is far more valuable. How to train your mind to think with precision, how to organize your thoughts quickly, how to filter out the unnecessary, and how to build responses that express exactly what you want to communicate. And most importantly, how to do it in real time, even when you don't have time to think. This is not theory. This is transformation. This is for you if you've ever gone blank in a conversation. If after speaking, you've thought, I should have said this, or that wasn't the best I could do. It's for you if your words have ever gotten you in trouble, if you feel like you're not expressing yourself clearly, or if you know there's more intelligence in you than what your words are showing. It's for you if you want to speak with more confidence, more presence, and more impact. Because when you think clearly, you speak powerfully. And when you speak powerfully, you don't need to shout, impress, or explain yourself. Your very presence communicates. In the coming chapters, you'll receive mental tools, practical exercises, and powerful reflections that will help you unlock the agile thinking already inside you. We'll explore how to cultivate mental silence, how to manage your attention, how to control your emotional response, and how to structure your thoughts to speak more clearly, concisely, and directly. You'll also learn how to respond with elegance in difficult moments, how to speak with intention rather than reaction, and how to turn every conversation into an opportunity for positive influence. The human mind operates at incredible speed, but often that speed becomes an enemy if it's not directed. Thinking fast does not mean speaking without thinking. It means having the power to think clearly when others get clouded. It means being able to pause without going blank. It means being able to say in one sentence what others need minutes to explain. That is the difference between speaking for the sake of it and communicating with purpose. That is the difference between reacting and responding. That is the difference between those who create impact and those who simply participate. This is your starting point. Today, you choose to stop speaking by reflex and start speaking with focus. Today, you choose to master the instant between thought and word. Today, you choose to speak better, more clearly, and more intelligently. What follows is not just knowledge, it's practice. It's daily training that will accompany you in every conversation from now on. The mind that thinks before speaking is the mind that opens doors, builds bridges, and leads with clarity. And now, that mind can be yours. But before we continue, write in the comments what city you're listening from, and if this message is resonating with you, subscribe to the channel now. That way, you won't miss any content that feeds your mind and brings you closer to the life you truly deserve. There's no time to waste. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The space between thought and word. In every conversation you have, no matter how simple or casual it may seem, there is a moment that defines everything. It's that brief instant between what you think and what you choose to say. That space, often overlooked by most, is the true power zone of the conscious communicator. Because in that tiny interval, you can craft an intelligent response or release a clumsy reaction. You can choose words that connect or words that hurt. You can decide whether to speak with purpose or with haste. It's not about artificially stretching that moment, but about inhabiting it with clarity. About training your mind to recognize that between the stimulus and your verbal response, there is a choice. And in that choice lies your communicative intelligence. We think language happens automatically, that an idea arises and we simply speak it. But that's an illusion. In reality, there is always a filter, sometimes unconscious. The secret is to make that filter intentional, precise, and effective. When you learn to identify that space, you begin to gain real control over what you express. You're no longer a slave to impulse or urgency. You become the owner of your words. Imagine for a moment a difficult argument. Someone criticizes, confronts, or provokes you. The automatic response, the one that bypasses the conscious space, is usually defensive, reactive, or even destructive. But if you train your mind to inhabit that space, even for a fraction of a second, you can transform your reply into something far more powerful. An affirmation of your clarity, a declaration of your values, a display of your emotional intelligence. The space between thought and word is like a bridge. When it's well built, you can cross it with stability, without falling into the chaos of reaction. But when you're unaware of it or fail to strengthen it, that bridge becomes a trap. You fall into empty, poorly formulated, hurtful, or unnecessary words. And the worst part is that many times you're not even aware of what you've said until it's too late. That's why developing the ability to recognize and expand that instant is crucial. It's not about stopping yourself for 5 seconds before speaking. It's about making your mind so fast and precise that this microspace becomes a pause filled with clarity. It's the art of thinking with agility and speaking with awareness. The people who make an impact with their words are not those who improvise without thought. They are those who have trained that inner space to filter what doesn't add value, to transform emotion into wisdom, to turn mental chaos into verbal order. You don't need to be eloquent to speak with power. You need to be present. And presence is built in that silent space where you choose the words with which you want to shape your world. Because every word that comes out of your mouth has an effect. And that effect can be intentional or accidental. Thinking before speaking ensures that the effect is one you consciously chose. For many, that space doesn't exist. They say what they think, with no control at all. And that's why they later regret it. They speak from raw emotion, without a filter, and then pay the price. But you can be different. You can start to identify that instant. You can train yourself to observe it, to enter it with mental strength. You can develop the ability to pause without seeming weak, to respond without reacting, to speak without attacking. And that's not repression, it's maturity. It's practical intelligence. Because it's not about holding everything back, but about expressing the right thing at the right time with language that builds rather than destroys. Every time you speak, remember, between what you think and what you say, there's an opportunity. An opportunity to influence, to elevate the conversation, to leave a lasting impression. That opportunity is always there, but only if you see it. Only if you learn to make a mental pause, even a minimal one. Only if you train your attention to stay present. And that starts today. It starts here. It starts with a commitment to not speak just to speak, to not respond on impulse, to not let your mind shoot out words without direction. It starts with a decision to own your internal space, to become a conscious speaker, to use your voice with power, precision, and purpose. This space between thought and word is the core of everything you'll learn to master. As you progress, you'll see how every tool you integrate is designed to strengthen that instant. Not to make it longer, but to make it deeper. Not to slow you down, but to make you more mentally agile. Because true agility isn't about speed, it's about precision. And precision is born from silence. From that space where you breathe, think, choose, and only then speak. That is the difference between those who communicate from the surface and those who communicate from a trained mind. You are here to become the latter. And that begins by honoring that space. Because that is where it all starts. Chapter 2, Inner Silence. Your best ally for thinking clearly. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of attention. It is a space where there is no mental noise, no immediate judgment, no need to respond. In that state, the mind doesn't race, it observes. It doesn't rush, it breathes. And it is precisely there, in that inner silence, where the clarity we seek when speaking begins to develop. Because you can't communicate what you can't see. And if your mind is saturated with thoughts, emotions, distractions, or impulses, what you say will be a mere extension of that chaos. But if you train the silence within you, the ideas that emerge will come from calm, from structure, from a cleaner and more conscious source. Inner silence is like a forgotten tool. It's always available, yet we don't use it because we live in a culture that rewards speed, reaction, and instant response. We were taught to speak before thinking, to fill awkward gaps with words, to avoid silence because silence appears weak. But that is a great lie. The one who stays silent with presence, with intention, with control, is the one who truly masters the conversation. Because silence is not passivity. It is contained power. It is mental energy organizing itself, evaluating, and directing itself toward a clearer and more precise idea. To think clearly before speaking, you need to create that inner space. A place where words don't arise reflexively, but by choice. Where you don't just react to what you hear, but integrate it, understand it, filter it, and then turn it into a response aligned with who you are. When you're in inner silence, you give yourself permission to listen without planning your reply. You allow yourself to observe what the other person is saying, and also to observe what you're feeling. And that double observation, external and internal, gives you a huge advantage. Because now you're no longer trapped in an emotional reaction. You have perspective. You have options. You have practical intelligence. A mind that is always noisy cannot choose clearly. It is led by the first thing that shows up. And the first thing that shows up isn't always the best thing you can say. Sometimes it's a defense, sometimes a repeated phrase, sometimes an emotion you haven't fully processed. Inner silence is the space where you filter out those automatic responses and connect with what you truly want to express. It's a subtle yet powerful pause that marks the difference between someone who merely talks and someone who communicates from their center. Many fear silence because they believe it's uncomfortable. That if they don't respond quickly, they'll seem weak, insecure, or uninformed. But the truth is that the most intelligent people don't fear the pause. They value it. They use it as a tool for clarity. Even in the most complex conversations, a brief pause can make the difference between an emotional response and a conscious one. And when you use that pause with mastery, it doesn't come across as weakness. It's perceived as control, as thoughtfulness, as presence. Because only someone who is comfortable with themselves can tolerate silence without desperately needing to fill it. Having inner silence doesn't mean you don't think. It means you think without noise. That your mind moves in an orderly way, without stumbling over itself. That you're not in a rush to say something, but focused on saying the right thing. It's in that state that you can see more clearly your intentions, your emotions, and your ideas. And that clarity translates directly into better communication. When your mind is clear, your voice is clear too. You don't need to decorate it with fancy phrases or defend it with volume. You simply speak from a place of certainty. To develop that silence, you need practice. You need real moments of pause in your day. You need to get used to observing your thoughts without clinging to them, without judging or pushing them. Just observe. Watch them arise and pass. Train your mind to stay present without needing to react to everything. You can do this with mindfulness exercises, conscious breathing, or simply dedicating a few minutes each day to doing nothing but listening to your own silence. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. But over time, you'll discover that within that space lies your greatest source of clarity. Inner silence does not oppose action. It enhances it. It's not a weakness, it's a discipline. Because staying silent when you could speak, observing when you could judge, thinking when you could react, that is a sign of mental strength, of maturity, of inner mastery. And it is that strength that translates into real power when speaking. Because when you have silence within, you choose your words more wisely. And when you choose your words more wisely, your conversations elevate, your impact grows, your message becomes clearer, stronger, and more authentic. Every time you feel the urge to respond immediately, remember this principle. If what you're about to say doesn't come from clarity, wait. Breathe. Go silent. Look within. Because right there, in that moment when you choose not to speak yet, the best version of your response is forming. One that doesn't react, but leads. One that doesn't unload, but builds. One that doesn't seek to be right, but to create understanding. That is the difference between the average communicator and the conscious one. And that difference is cultivated in silence. Chapter 3. Slow listening to respond with precision. Listening is not simply hearing what the other person says. Listening is a discipline. It's a form of respect, of connection, and of power. Most people don't listen to understand. They listen to reply. While the other person is speaking, their mind is already crafting an argument, an objection, or a defense. They are more focused on what they're going to say than on what they're receiving. And that habit is one of the main causes of misunderstandings, unnecessary conflicts, and conversations that go nowhere. Slow listening is not a synonym for passivity. It's a conscious strategy to gain more clarity, more information, and more power before opening your mouth. The one who listens attentively holds the advantage, because they know exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to say it with precision. Slow listening is training to break the urge to always have a ready answer. It means understanding that the pause, the silence, and the deep observation allow the other person's message to arrive in full. And not just the words, but the intention behind those words. Because many times, what someone says isn't exactly what they mean to communicate. Sometimes there's fear, confusion, expectation, or emotion behind it. And only someone who truly listens can perceive that hidden layer of the conversation. As you train in slow listening, you begin to notice not just the content of the sentences, but the tone, the energy, the silences, and the subtle contradictions. You start reading between the lines, and that gives you a clarity that most people lack. Responding with precision is not about guessing or improvising. It's about attentively processing what you've received, and from there, constructing a response that makes sense, that is relevant, and that communicates what's necessary. Nothing more, nothing less. And that kind of precision is only possible if you're not rushing. If you're not on autopilot. If you're not trying to win the conversation. Responding with precision is an act of practical intelligence, but also of humility. Because it means that before speaking, you have listened deeply, understood clearly, and chosen your words intentionally. Most people speak from reflex. You are going to speak from your center. Slow listening also means listening without judgment. Because often, while someone is talking, our mind is evaluating, classifying, criticizing. This is wrong, this is exaggerated, this isn't true, and that mental interference prevents us from truly understanding. If you really want to speak with intelligence, you first need to empty your mind while listening. Be present. Receive without filtering. And afterward, with everything you've received, build an aligned response. This practice not only improves your communication, it also strengthens your relationships. Because when someone feels truly heard, they lower their guard. They open up. They trust. And that allows you to have far more effective conversations, even in difficult situations. Another key part of slow listening is resisting the urge to interrupt. It may seem obvious, but most people interrupt without realizing it. Sometimes because they want to correct, sometimes to finish someone's idea, or simply because they can't tolerate the silence. But every time you interrupt, you break the other person's flow, you take away their space, and you rob yourself of the opportunity to understand more deeply. Learning to stay silent while the other person finishes, even when you think you've already understood, is a powerful way to train your mind in self-control. It's a sign of respect, but also a strategic advantage. Because when you let someone finish, they often reveal things they wouldn't have said if you had cut them off. And that extra information gives you more tools to craft a clearer and more effective response. Slow listening also means reading the context. Because not everything that is said carries the same weight in every situation. There are moments when a single word can change everything, and others where silence means more than a sentence. When you train your listening skills, you develop a special sensitivity to perceive those kinds of nuances. You learn to feel the rhythm of the conversation, to know when to step in and when to wait. That kind of social intelligence doesn't come from memorizing phrases, it comes from practicing conscious listening. From being fully present, without hurry, without distractions, without needing to impress. Because many times, the real power lies in not speaking yet. The most interesting part of this practice is that it forces you to slow down your mind. And in a world where everything moves so fast, slowing down is an act of rebellion, but also of wisdom. Because when you lower the speed, you see more details. And those details allow you to speak with greater precision. You're no longer responding to the surface. You're responding to what truly matters. That is the difference between an empty conversation and a powerful one. Between a forgettable phrase and one that marks a before and after. Precision in words is born from depth in listening. There are no shortcuts. Start observing yourself. Every time you talk to someone, notice if you're truly listening, or just waiting for your turn to speak. Notice if you're present, or if your mind is already crafting a reply. Notice if you can stay silent while the other person finishes, without rushing them, without interrupting. That constant self-observation is the first step to changing your pattern. And once you change it, your way of communicating transforms. People notice the difference. They listen to you more, respect you more, trust you more. Because there is a different energy in someone who listens with intention. An energy that can't be faked, but can be built through practice. Slow listening also protects you. Because it helps you avoid misunderstandings, exaggerations, and unnecessary reactions. Many times, what bothers us about what someone says isn't what they actually said, but what we interpreted from our rushed mind. But when you listen calmly, you can distinguish between what was said and what your ego wants to reply to. You can take internal distance and choose not to get hooked. And from there, speak with clarity, with precision, with firmness, if needed, but without losing your center. That's real strength, responding without ceasing to be yourself. From now on, begin practicing slow listening as a way to think better. Not just to speak with precision, but to connect better, to lead better, to understand better. Every conversation is a training opportunity. Every time someone speaks to you, observe yourself. Focus on what matters. And when you speak, let your words be like arrows. Few, direct, precise. Because that's what a conscious communicator does. And you are on the path to becoming one. Chapter 4. Speak from intention, not from ego. To speak from intention is to speak from purpose, from awareness, from inner clarity. It is very different from speaking from ego, which seeks to be right, to appear superior, or to protect itself with empty words. When the ego takes control of our conversations, what we say no longer aims to connect, clarify, or build. It aims to dominate, to resist, to feed an image. And that way of communicating creates distance, tension, and noise. The ego doesn't want to understand the other person. It wants to win. It doesn't seek solutions. It seeks recognition. It doesn't respond calmly. It reacts impulsively. That's why, if you truly want to speak with power and precision, you must learn to silence the ego and speak from your highest intention. Speaking from intention means being very clear about why you are saying what you're saying. Every word you use should serve a purpose. Are you speaking to clear up a misunderstanding, to express your boundaries, to share an idea, to ask for help, to establish an agreement? Or are you speaking just to defend yourself, justify yourself, show that you know more, or prove the other person wrong? That difference is fundamental. Intention guides the direction of your words, gives them meaning, makes them coherent. Ego, on the other hand, fills them with noise, distorts them, and turns them into tools of defense instead of connection. A conversation guided by intention carries a different energy. It has structure, purpose, and presence. Even if it's a difficult conversation, even if you disagree with someone, when you speak from intention, you can maintain calm, focus, and respect. Because you're no longer trying to protect your image, you're trying to communicate a real message. And that can be felt. The other person senses it. And even if they don't agree with you, they can still listen. Because there is truth, not reactivity. Because there is clarity, not ego. Because there is direction, not a power struggle. The problem is that most of the time, we don't stop to identify our true intention before speaking. We simply talk from the emotion of the moment, from discomfort, frustration, anxiety, or the need to be right. And later, we realize we said things that didn't reflect what we truly wanted to express. The key is to take a mental pause before speaking and ask yourself, what is my true intention here? What do I want to achieve with what I'm about to say? Am I building or just reacting? These simple questions can change the tone of an entire conversation. Speaking from intention also frees you from the burden of approval. When your ego speaks, it expects a reaction. It wants to be applauded, validated, accepted. But when you speak from intention, you don't need the other person to agree with you. You just need to be clear, authentic, and aligned. Your confidence doesn't depend on external responses, but on internal alignment. You know that what you said reflects what you truly think, feel, and mean to express. And that's enough. Because true communication is about expressing from the center, without decoration, without masks, without manipulation. Another important point is that ego tends to use language as a shield or a weapon. It attacks or defends. It's ironic, sarcastic, passive-aggressive, or controlling. Whereas intention uses language as a bridge. It connects, clarifies, transforms. There's no need to manipulate, exaggerate, or dramatize. There's just a deep desire to be understood and to understand. When you speak from that place, words flow more naturally. You don't need to overthink, because you're not performing, you're being. You're not trying to convince, you're sharing. And that authenticity has a magnetic power. In difficult conversations, speaking from intention can be the key difference between a destructive conflict and a transformative dialogue. Because when the other person feels that you're not attacking but expressing your truth, they lower their defenses. They open up to listening. And then something powerful happens. It's no longer two egos fighting to win, it's two minds trying to understand each other. And that ground is fertile for agreements, for learning, for real progress. It doesn't mean everything will be magically resolved, but it does mean you'll be communicating with intelligence, not with impulse. Speaking from intention also requires you to examine your emotions. Because many times, we think we're speaking with good intent, but we're doing it from resentment, frustration, or the need to control. Intention isn't just shown in what you say, but in how you say it. Your tone, your gaze, your body language all reveal your internal state. That's why, if you want to speak from a clean intention, you first need to clear your mind. Breathe. Reflect. Ask yourself, is what I'm about to say coming from a wounded ego or from conscious clarity? If it's coming from ego, wait. If it's coming from awareness, speak firmly, but without aggression. With presence, but without arrogance. Start observing your past conversations. Ask yourself in which moments you spoke from intention and in which you spoke from ego. you'll notice a radical difference in the outcome of each. Conversations guided by intention often leave a sense of peace, progress, and connection. Conversations guided by ego leave tension, exhaustion, distance, or guilt. It's not that you should never feel strong emotions. On the contrary, it's valid to feel them. But you don't need to speak from them. You can feel anger without speaking with rage. You can feel frustration without attacking. You can feel fear without shutting down. That's what intention allows, channeling your emotions without letting them control your words. Speaking from intention is also something you can train. It doesn't happen like magic. It's a conscious practice. Every time you're about to have an important conversation, pause for a moment. Check your mind. Ask yourself, what do I truly want this person to understand? What result do I want to create? How can I say it clearly and directly, without falling into unnecessary reactions? That small moment of clarity before speaking can change everything. You don't need to give perfect speeches or pretend to be someone you're not. You just need to be aligned with yourself. And when you are, the words you choose will have more power than 1,000 well-crafted arguments from the ego. From now on, every time you face an important conversation, remember this principle. If you don't have a clear intention, don't speak yet. Find it, anchor it, and then express what you need to say from that place. Speaking from intention doesn't guarantee that everyone will understand you or that you'll always come out on top. But it does guarantee that you'll be acting with coherence, with maturity, and with intelligence. And that way of communicating not only improves your relationships, it also transforms how you see yourself. Because when you speak from your intention, you feel more whole, more powerful, more at peace. And deep down, that's what we're all seeking. Chapter 5. Speed doesn't equal intelligence. In a world where quick responses are valued as signs of intelligence, it's easy to fall into the trap of speaking without thinking, of filling silence with empty words just to avoid seeming slow or insecure. But true intelligence isn't measured by how fast a response is delivered, it's measured by the quality of thought behind it. A fast mind isn't always a clear one, and a quick mouth isn't always connected to deep intention. In fact, many of the greatest communication mistakes are born from the urge to speak before understanding, to respond before listening, to react before processing. Those who master the art of thinking quickly before speaking aren't necessarily the fastest to speak, but the most skilled at identifying the exact moment when a pause, a reflection, or a strategic silence allows them to deliver a message with real impact. Speed may impress for a moment, but only depth leaves a lasting impression. A shallow argument might sound brilliant, but will be forgotten as soon as a louder one shows up. In contrast, a well-thought-out response, even if it takes a few seconds longer, has the power to cut through the noise, to linger in the listener's mind, and to transmit authority without raising the volume. In meaningful conversations, true leaders don't rush. They take their time, observe, listen, and think. And when they finally speak, every word seems to carry intention, every sentence built to move the dialogue forward. They're not afraid of silence because they understand that silence also communicates, and that controlling the timing in a conversation is a form of power. Learning to slow down isn't a loss, it's a strategy. It's about cultivating a mental space where ideas simmer, where they're reviewed before being expressed, where they're polished before becoming voice. This space, however small, is what separates an impulsive response from a wise one. Thinking fast is not the same as speaking fast. Thinking fast means having mental agility to process what's happening, but also having the maturity not to cave into the pressure of the moment, not to speak just to fill the void. And that kind of agility is only developed when you train your mind not to jump straight to speech, but to explore the idea first. In professional, social, and family settings, the person who masters this principle becomes a figure of balance. They don't need to be the one who talks the most to be the most respected. Their interventions, even when brief, carry the power of being well considered. And that power not only inspires, it guides, educates, and transforms. The one who speaks without thinking may be loud, but rarely changes a situation. The one who thinks before speaking, even if they speak slowly, can change the course of a conversation, a negotiation, or even a life. This shift in focus requires courage. It's easier to keep up with the frantic pace of immediacy than to pause and evaluate what you truly want to say. But it's in that pause that real power is born. It's in that moment of restraint that the professional is distinguished from the improvised, the leader from the follower, the wise from the impulsive. Speaking with intelligence isn't the product of a fast mind, but of a mind aligned with purpose. And that purpose only reveals itself when you learn to slow down to increase the quality of your thoughts. The key, then, is not to eliminate mental speed, but to learn how to channel it. Not every thought must become a word, and not every word needs to be spoken immediately. A brilliant mind is recognized by its ability to choose what to say, how to say it, and, most importantly, when to say it. In many cases, timing is the factor that carries the most weight. A poorly timed word can destroy what good intention aimed to build. A well-measured word, spoken at the right moment, can heal, open doors, or resolve conflict. The difference is not in speed, but in the awareness with which you choose to act. By integrating this principle into your daily life, you'll begin to notice a deep shift in the way you communicate. You stop talking just to talk, and start influencing. You stop competing for the last word and start building with what you say. You'll notice people begin to truly listen to you, not because you're louder or faster, but because what you say makes sense, has direction, and carries purpose. And that transformation not only improves your conversations, it elevates your presence in any environment. Because when you choose to think before you speak, when you decide not to be dragged by hollow speed, you begin to operate at a new level of communication, one where every word becomes a vehicle of awareness, and every silence a sign of wisdom. Chapter 6. Master your mind in moments of pressure. In moments of pressure, when words can define opportunities, relationships, or reputations, the most important thing is not what is said, but the internal control one has over the mind that decides how to say it. Mastering the mind in tense situations doesn't mean avoiding stress. It means knowing how to direct it, channel it, and transform it into a source of sharp focus and intelligent response. Most people, under pressure, go into reactive mode. They speak without thinking, justify themselves without clarity, or freeze. But the person who learns to control their mind in such moments becomes someone who, instead of being dominated by the moment, dominates the moment. Pressure doesn't disappear, but it changes form, from threat to opportunity. The first step toward achieving this is immediate awareness. Knowing you're in a tense moment, recognizing that your mind might lean toward chaos, is the beginning of control. When you feel your heart racing, your mouth drying, or your mind clouding, it's not the time to ignore those signals, but to use them as anchors to center yourself. Instead of trying to calm everything down, the ideal move is to focus on your breath, even if only for 3 seconds. That brief pause has the power to break the reactive impulse and open space for a thoughtful response. Because when the body aligns with the mind, and both synchronize in an intentional pause, mental clarity appears. That's when you can take control of the moment, the message, and the impact. Mastering the mind under pressure also means preparing before pressure arises. People who seem to have brilliant, quick responses in difficult moments have actually trained their minds beforehand. They've visualized scenarios, practiced how they feel under pressure, and rehearsed key responses to common situations. They don't improvise in chaos. They recall what they've already prepared. That's why every day is an opportunity to practice mental mastery. Don't wait to be under fire to learn how to breathe, think, and speak clearly. Train during the small moments so that, when the big one comes, your mind responds from the habit of calm, not from panic. Also, mastering the mind under pressure doesn't mean being cold. It's not about speaking like a robot without emotion, but rather about putting emotion in service of the message, not the other way around. When you let anger speak, let fear dictate your words, or let anxiety push you to fill silence with noise, you lose control of the message. But when you take that emotion, acknowledge it, and transform it into focus, your words gain strength without losing direction. Well-managed pressure gives your voice power. Speaking with power under pressure isn't speaking louder, it's speaking clearer. It's transmitting a certainty that doesn't come from volume, but from the internal conviction that mental mastery produces. And finally, remember that pressure doesn't only come from external situations. It also comes from the inner voices whispering insecurity, doubt, or fear of failure. True mental mastery includes knowing how to respond to those voices. It's not about silencing them forcefully, but observing them with maturity and responding with clarity. When you tell yourself, "I'm going to fail," respond with, "I'm prepared, and I can adapt." When your mind says, "I don't know what to say," answer, "I'll listen first, then choose with intention." The language you use with yourself in moments of pressure is the language that defines the quality of your speech to others. If your mind is trained to speak to itself with power, you'll speak with power to the world, even when everything seems to be falling apart. That is true mastery, speaking clearly when pressure tightens. And like all art, that art is cultivated every single day. Chapter 7. Think in real time without freezing. Thinking in real time without freezing is a skill that completely transforms your ability to communicate with fluency, clarity, and authority. It's not about having all the answers in advance, but about trusting your ability to build ideas on the spot, to improvise with coherence, to respond without letting the fear of making mistakes paralyze your mind. Many people feel incapable of speaking smoothly because they wait for the perfect sentence before opening their mouth. But that anticipation of perfection is a trap that keeps you in silence. Agile thinking doesn't aim for perfection, it aims for progress. It's like walking while building the path. And the more you train this mental agility, the more natural it becomes to express yourself even under uncertain conditions. One of the keys to thinking in real time is accepting that you don't need to know everything to speak intelligently. Your power lies in your ability to observe, connect ideas, and communicate what you do know with confidence, without making up what you don't. That means learning to speak from what is true for you in the moment, even if it's just a part of the full answer. For example, if someone asks you something and you don't have an exact response, you can start with what you do know and build from there. Phrases like, "from my experience," "what I've noticed is," or "one way to look at it is this," give you structure to move forward without freezing. Thinking while speaking isn't risky when you do it from honesty, clarity, and a desire to contribute. Another powerful technique is to visualize your ideas before speaking them. Even though it might seem impossible to do this in milliseconds, the brain is built to connect patterns at high speed. When you train daily to group ideas and structure your thoughts into introduction, development, and conclusion, your mind starts to work with these templates automatically. So when you're in front of someone, you already have an internal method to organize what you're going to say, even if you hadn't prepared it in advance. That mental structure prevents you from rambling, getting lost, or freezing. You learn to trust that your mind can guide you in the moment. If you stop demanding perfection and give it permission to flow with order. Thinking in real time also requires working on your presence. When you are fully present in a conversation, your mind picks up cues, emotions, and keywords, and uses that information to build a relevant response. But if your attention is split between what's happening and your fear of saying something wrong, you sabotage yourself. Being present isn't just an empty phrase, it's a conscious practice. It means listening actively, making eye contact, breathing deeply, and trusting that the present moment holds everything you need to respond well. The mind doesn't freeze due to lack of ideas, but due to excessive self-judgment. Silencing the inner critic opens space for spontaneous thinking. Furthermore, real-time thinking improves when you make smart pauses. You don't need to respond instantly to sound intelligent. On the contrary, those who allow themselves a short pause before speaking often come across as more confident and clear. That pause not only gives you time to organize your thoughts, but also shows that you're thinking. People value someone who doesn't react impulsively, but responds with intention. Train the pause as a tool, not as a sign of insecurity. Make silence your ally, because in that brief space is where the best version of your thinking forms. That's where the block turns into clarity. Finally, remember that thinking in real time without freezing isn't about brilliance, it's about training. You can start with daily exercises like speaking out loud about a random topic for 2 minutes without stopping. Then, record yourself answering random questions and analyze how you build your ideas. Little by little, your mind learns that it can trust itself. What seems hard today becomes natural with practice. Quick thinking doesn't come from having perfect answers, but from trusting your ability to build them as you speak. And that trust is only cultivated through action, practice, presence, and the decision not to give up when your mind wants to freeze. Because right there, in that moment of emptiness, is where your true power to speak and think like a leader is born. Chapter 8. The Language of Self-Control. How not to say what you'll later regret. The language of self-control is one of the invisible pillars that separates those who speak with wisdom from those who react on impulse. Every word we utter has an impact, and often that impact leads to consequences we wish we hadn't caused. Mastering the art of not saying what you'll later regret is an act of emotional maturity and personal power. It's not about repressing yourself, but about regulating your emotional energy before it turns into destructive words. Because a single phrase said in a moment of anger can erode years of trust. And an impulsive comment can close doors that took time and effort to open. The language of self-control begins long before you speak. It starts the moment you choose to breathe, feel, think, and only then respond. Not saying what you'll later regret means cultivating the space between stimulus and response. That small gap is where your power lies. Most people react because they haven't trained themselves in that conscious pause. When someone hurts you, provokes you, or contradicts you, the natural impulse is to defend or strike back. But true mastery happens when you can observe your emotion, feel its intensity, and still choose a language that doesn't destroy. This is not weakness, it's wisdom. Speaking with self-control doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. It means expressing them constructively. It means learning to say, "I'm upset, but I want to resolve this well," instead of exploding in yelling or sarcasm. It's using your words as a bridge, not as a weapon. A key technique is reframing what you feel before expressing it. If you're angry, instead of saying, "You make me feel useless," you can say, "When this happens, I find it hard not to feel devalued." By making that shift, you reduce aggression and increase connection. Self-control not only protects your relationships, it also protects you. Because words spoken in a moment of fury leave behind a trail of guilt and damage that often can't be undone. When you learn to hold back, you become a trustworthy person, someone whose words carry weight, and who doesn't get dragged by fleeting impulses. That inspires respect. Real power doesn't lie in saying everything you think, but in choosing wisely what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. Moreover, mastering the language of self-control requires observing your patterns. In what situations do you tend to lose verbal control? What kinds of comments trigger you? Identifying these points gives you an advantage, because you can prepare responses or strategies before the moment arrives. For example, if you know that in meetings you tend to interrupt when someone disagrees with you, you can practice the habit of jotting down your ideas instead of blurting them out. Or if you tend to raise your voice during family arguments, you can train yourself to speak more slowly and use phrases that begin with "I feel" instead of "you always." That kind of self-awareness is what turns impulse into choice. Another key is to take care of your inner language. What you say to yourself directly influences what you say to others. If internally you repeat things like, "They don't respect me," "They're against me," or "I have no control," it's likely that your speech will come out harsh, aggressive, or frustrated. But if you train your mind to think, "This bothers me, but I can handle it," or "I don't like what's happening, but I can respond wisely," then your outer language will reflect that inner calm. Self-control is fueled by the dialogue you maintain with yourself. That's why speaking to yourself with respect, patience, and firmness is the first step toward speaking the same way to others, even when everything inside you wants to explode. It's also helpful to learn how to step away from a conversation before it escalates. Sometimes the greatest act of self-control is saying, "I need a moment to calm down before we continue talking," and briefly walking away. You're not running, you're protecting the connection. Because when you're on the verge of saying something hurtful, there's nothing to gain by continuing. Coming back with a clearer mind allows you to speak from reason, not from the wound. Self-control is a habit built through small daily decisions. And when those decisions become consistent, you become someone who speaks with intention, not with impulse. Someone who masters their verbal power and uses it to build, not destroy. The language of self-control does not make you less authentic. On the contrary, it makes you more powerful because you consciously choose how to show up in the world. You are not a victim of your emotions or your words. You are the owner of your voice. And when you know when to stay silent, when to speak, and how to turn emotion into a useful message, your words become a tool for leadership. Speaking with self-control doesn't just elevate you, it elevates those who hear you. Because your example shows that it's possible to tell the truth without hurting, to express disagreement without destroying, and to correct without humiliating. That's the kind of communication that changes lives. That's the kind of person the world needs. Someone who masters their mind, their emotion, and their language, with wisdom. Chapter 9. Your voice as a reflection of your mind. Your voice is not just a sound you make to communicate. It is a direct mirror of your mental, emotional, and even spiritual state. Every word you speak, every tone you use, Every pause you take reflects what is happening inside you. That's why learning to speak better starts with learning to think better. If your mind is scattered, anxious, or reactive, it will show in your voice, trembling, rushed, aggressive, or insecure. But if your mind is centered, clear, and focused, your voice becomes firmer, more persuasive, more magnetic. You cannot separate the quality of your external communication from the state of your internal world. Mastering your voice, then, is also mastering your mind. Many people believe that improving the way they speak is simply about practicing breathing techniques or working on their diction in front of a mirror. That helps, yes, but it's only the surface. The root of a powerful voice lies in how you think and how you manage your emotions. If you carry thoughts of insecurity, your voice tends to shrink. If your mind is full of pride or defensiveness, your voice may come off as arrogant or tense. But if you think with clarity, intention, and empathy, your voice aligns with those qualities and conveys confidence, respect, and authority, without forcing it. Your voice follows your mind like an instrument follows the musician. That's why the quality of sound depends on the quality of thought. One of the most powerful habits you can develop is observing your inner dialogue. What are you telling yourself just before you speak? Are you preparing to defend yourself or to connect? Are you judging yourself or encouraging yourself? The voice you use with yourself becomes the voice you use with the world. If you speak to yourself with fear, doubt, and mistrust, that vibration will seep into your words. But if you speak to yourself with firmness, compassion, and focus, your external voice will naturally reflect that. You don't need to fake a confident voice if you train a confident mind. And you don't have to force a warm voice if you cultivate thoughts of empathy. Everything starts in the invisible. Your mental world is the factory of your voice. Another key point is understanding that your voice changes according to your emotional state. When you're nervous, your breath shortens, your vocal cords tighten, and your voice may come out shaky or high-pitched. When you're frustrated, your tone might become sharp, impatient, or even aggressive. The solution isn't to suppress what you feel, but to learn how to regulate it. Breathing deeply, pausing, and shifting your mental focus before speaking helps you regain control. Often, just reminding yourself of a phrase like, "I can handle this calmly," or "I will speak from clarity, not emotion," can completely shift the energy of your voice. An organized mind produces a voice that leads. The way you think also shapes the rhythm of your speech. When your mind is overwhelmed with unfiltered thoughts, you tend to speak quickly, stumbling, leaving no space for others to process what you're saying. But when your thinking is focused, when you know what you want to communicate and why, you speak with pauses, with intention, with structure. Pauses aren't empty silences. They are the mark of a mind that thinks before it releases. And that kind of voice builds trust, respect, and attention. No one respects someone who talks as if rushing to finish. But everyone listens to someone who knows when to be silent, when to emphasize, and how to hold space with their vocal presence. Even your tone automatically adjusts to your deepest beliefs. If, deep down, you feel that your message isn't valuable, your voice will drop. If you believe you don't deserve to be heard, your tone will waver. But if you speak with conviction, if you know what you're saying matters, your voice is filled with an energy that can't be faked. That energy is what makes others listen, not because you're forcing them to, but because they sense there's truth in what you're saying. A powerful voice doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be connected to a clear mind and a real purpose. That connection is what makes you a presence that's impossible to ignore. Training your mind to speak better also means cleansing your automatic thoughts. You can't have an impactful voice if your mind is constantly repeating limiting beliefs like, "I'm not good at this," "They're going to judge me," "They'll interrupt me," "It doesn't matter what I say." These ideas sabotage your vocal presence. Instead, replace them with thoughts like, "My voice can make a positive impact," "I will express myself clearly," "I have the right to be heard," "I can communicate with power and respect." These new thoughts not only change how you feel, they change how you sound. And that transformation is what turns your voice into a tool of real influence. There are people who, just by speaking, convey calm, leadership, empathy, or authority. And often it's not because they have a naturally attractive voice, but because they've cultivated a mind aligned with those qualities. What you feel and think leaks into your tone, your volume, your words. That's why speaking better is a consequence of thinking better. Be mindful of what you consume mentally, because that too affects your voice. If you feed your mind with complaints, judgments, criticism, or anxiety, your language will reflect that energy. But if you train your mind with thoughts of possibility, clarity, and purpose, your voice will become stronger, more authentic, and more persuasive. It's not about sounding like someone else. It's about discovering your true voice, the one that arises when your mind is in harmony with your values, your emotions, and your intention. When you speak from a place of internal truth, your voice finds its most natural and powerful form. And you don't need to imitate anyone, because your authenticity becomes your greatest strength. A clear mind produces a clear voice. A chaotic mind produces a confused voice. It's that simple. That's why working on your voice without working on your mind is like tuning an instrument without knowing what music you want to play. The mind leads, the voice follows. The power of your message begins long before you open your mouth. It begins in what you choose to think. So, if you want a voice that inspires, connects, and has impact, train your mind to think with clarity, purpose, and emotional control. That is the real preparation. Because any vocal technique loses power if your message lacks a strong root in thought. But when your mind and voice are in sync, you become someone who doesn't just speak well. You become someone who transforms with your words. Your voice is your mind amplified. So if you want to change how others hear you, start by changing how you listen to yourself. Because in the end, every word that leaves your mouth is an extension of the conversation happening within you. Chapter 10. Be clear, concise, and purposeful. Being clear, concise, and purposeful when you speak is not a coincidence. It's a trained skill. Many people believe that to sound intelligent or persuasive, they must speak more, use complex words, or fill silences with unnecessary explanations. But in reality, the more direct, simple, and focused your language is, the more powerful it becomes. People who think before they speak, eliminate verbal noise, and get to the point inspire immediate trust. When you speak with clarity, you show you know what you want to say. When you're brief, you show respect for others' time. And when you speak with purpose, you make it clear that your words carry value. This combination turns any conversation into a tool for impact. You don't need to be the one who speaks the most, just the one who speaks the best. Speaking clearly means organizing your mind before opening your mouth. Don't start a sentence without a clear idea of what you want to communicate. Clarity is born from precision. Instead of saying, "It was kind of complicated," say, "There was a misunderstanding about the objectives." Instead of beating around the bush or making assumptions, use concise, concrete statements. Clarity also requires avoiding filler words, vague expressions, and verbal clutter. Every word must serve a purpose. When you speak clearly, you become understandable, accessible, and trustworthy. There's no room for misinterpretation, and that prevents misunderstandings that often damage relationships and decisions. Remember, your job is not to impress with sophisticated words, but to communicate with real impact. Conciseness, for its part, doesn't mean saying less, it means saying what's necessary. It's the ability to eliminate what's superfluous and keep only what matters. People who can synthesize their ideas capture others' attention without overwhelming them. In a world overloaded with information, someone who can summarize and get to the point becomes magnetic. Practicing conciseness means learning to identify your core idea and express it without detours. For example, if you're going to make a proposal, don't begin with a long story. Say, "I'm proposing this for 2 main reasons," then elaborate. If you need to explain a mistake, don't over-justify. Say, "This happened, I take responsibility, and here's my solution." That way, the message doesn't get diluted, and you project confidence, focus, and effectiveness. Conciseness is communicative efficiency. Speaking with purpose is what gives clarity and conciseness their meaning. Every time you open your mouth, ask yourself, why am I saying this? What is my intention? What do I want to achieve with these words? When you have a clear purpose, your words align with your intention, and the message gains strength. Without purpose, you risk falling into empty talk, speaking just to speak, which drains energy and time without leaving any impact. Your purpose may be to inform, motivate, correct, inspire, warn, or connect. What matters is that you are clear about it before you speak. This way, you not only avoid saying unnecessary things, You steer the conversation toward a valuable outcome. People who speak with purpose aren't just heard, they're remembered. To train this skill, start by practicing in your daily environment. For example, before sending a message, think, what do I want the other person to understand? What outcome do I expect? Then, write that message in one sentence. If you're about to have an important conversation, mentally summarize the key point and prepare to express it in under 60 seconds. These practices strengthen your ability to be concise and precise. Also, observe how you communicate throughout the day. Do you tend to go in circles before making your point? Do you repeat ideas unnecessarily? Do you talk just to fill silence? If so, it's time to refine your language, like someone sharpening a tool until it cuts with elegance and ease. Clear, concise, and purposeful communication also elevates your personal and professional image. In the workplace, the most respected leaders aren't the ones who speak the most, but the ones who say what's essential at the right moment. In relationships, those who express their ideas without drama, confusion, or excessive words create harmony and stability. No one wants to be around someone who talks endlessly or never gets to the point. In contrast, someone who speaks with precision earns admiration, because it shows they've cultivated their thoughts before turning them into words. That projects intelligence, maturity, and natural authority. This style of communication also reduces conflict. Many arguments arise from a lack of clarity from the beginning. When someone is vague, sends mixed messages, or speaks at length without expressing what they really mean, misunderstandings occur. But clear, concise, and purposeful communication leaves little room for confusion. If you say, I don't agree with this, and I suggest this alternative, you're being assertive. If you say, thanks, but I'd rather not participate, you're being firm and respectful. Clarity is not rudeness, brevity is not coldness, and purpose is not manipulation. On the contrary, it's the highest expression of a well-trained mind that knows when, how, and why to speak. Finally, remember that mastering this skill takes constant practice. Every conversation is a chance to improve. Each time you choose more precise words, simpler phrases, and more intentional messages, you're sharpening your ability to influence and connect. Be as mindful of your words as a sculptor is of their tools. You don't need to embellish your message for it to be valuable. You need to refine it so it becomes unforgettable. Someone who learns to speak this way becomes a person with a powerful voice, capable of transforming spaces, inspiring decisions, and making a difference with just a few words. And that power is within reach for anyone who chooses to speak with clarity, conciseness, and a firm purpose. Chapter 11. How to think intelligently in the middle of a conversation. Thinking intelligently in the middle of a conversation is not just a desirable skill. It's a necessity in a world where the quality of our interactions defines the opportunities that unfold before us. Many people assume that thinking intelligently means having a quick response or sounding intellectually superior, but true conversational intelligence reveals itself when we can keep our mind open, flexible, and sharp, even in the most demanding exchanges. The first step toward this is slowing down our automatic reactions. Most people listen only to reply, not to understand. And that's where the mistake lies. Real intelligence is activated when we listen with intention, when we seek to grasp the deeper meaning of what the other person is communicating. Not just their words, but their emotions, intentions, and context. This deeper understanding allows us to respond with precision, not just with polished words, but with ideas that truly build the conversation and add clarity. In the midst of a conversation, especially under pressure or disagreement, the brain's natural tendency is to shift into defensive mode. This reaction blocks creativity, critical thinking, and empathy. That's why training your mind to remain calm and focused during dialogue is one of the most powerful practices you can develop. When you maintain inner calm, you access mental resources that remain closed off to those who operate from anxiety. A simple but effective trick is to take a micro-pause before responding. That pause, even if it lasts just a second, gives your brain space to filter out unnecessary emotion and activate logical thinking. In that tiny space between listening and speaking lies your power. Don't waste it by reacting automatically. Use it to choose the smartest response, the one that elevates the conversation rather than merely continuing it. Another key aspect of thinking intelligently during dialogue is asking better questions. The most influential and respected people aren't those who always have the answers, but those who know how to ask the right questions. Asking questions doesn't make you look weak. It makes you look curious, present, and engaged with understanding. A good question can change the direction of a conversation, open a new perspective, or even diffuse a hidden conflict. It also shows that you're truly connected to the conversation, not just waiting for your turn to speak. When you ask strategic questions, you prompt the other person to reflect, and often, that alone can unlock tension or confusion. Thinking in the middle of dialogue isn't just about delivering clever lines. It's about building a meaningful conversation where both sides grow. Having intelligence in dialogue also means mastering the art of synthesizing ideas. Sometimes conversations become confusing because people ramble or repeat the same thing in different words. If you can grasp the essence of what's being said and respond in a way that clarifies, summarizes, and directs the conversation, you immediately position yourself as a point of reference. People feel relief when someone brings order to verbal chaos. Becoming that person takes training, but it's a skill you can build through consistent practice. To do so, I recommend that at the end of every important conversation, do a quick mental review. Did I capture the central idea? Was my input clear and useful? Could I have responded more briefly or more deeply? This self-assessment strengthens your mental muscle and makes your interactions sharper over time. Finally, never forget that true intelligence in conversation includes humility. Accepting that you don't always need to have the last word, that you can change your mind when a better idea appears, or that silence is sometimes a form of wisdom, these are all signs of maturity. Speaking intelligently isn't about winning debates. It's about enriching the conversation and ensuring that everyone walks away with something valuable. In this way, you turn every dialogue into an opportunity for growth, connection, and transformation, for yourself and others. When you learn to think during conversation with calm, focus, empathy, and strategy, your voice begins to carry real impact. Not because you speak louder or faster, but because your words come from a place of clarity and purpose, and that is always felt and respected. Chapter 12. Transition phrases that organize your speech in the moment. Transition phrases are silent yet powerful tools that transform a scattered conversation or speech into a fluid, clear, and professional experience. Many speakers believe that having good ideas is enough to captivate their audience, but if those ideas aren't well connected, the message becomes diluted, lost, and difficult to follow. This is where transition phrases come in as invisible bridges that guide your audience from one thought to the next without abrupt jumps or confusion. Mastering their use not only makes you sound more structured, it also creates the impression that you're fully in control of what you're saying, even if you're improvising. When you speak, whether in a meeting, a presentation, or a deep conversation, your listener needs cues to know where you are and where you're going. Transition phrases serve this function by organizing your mental speech in real time. For example, saying, "What I mean by this is," or "to make this clearer," is not filler, it's direction. These phrases act as mental anchors for your listener. They say, "We're closing one idea and opening another." And that brings a sense of clarity. People trust those who communicate with structure because it feels like they're in the hands of someone who knows exactly where they're headed. Some essential transition phrases you can start using right now include, first of all, furthermore, on the other hand, however. To conclude this section, going back to what I was saying, now then, if we return to the main point, in summary, a clear example of this is, this leads us to think that, and most importantly, these phrases not only connect ideas, they add rhythm. Speaking without transitions is like writing without punctuation. You might have great ideas, but no one will follow you to the end. On the other hand, if you use these expressions wisely, you build a coherent, engaging, and professional auditory experience. Additionally, transition phrases help you buy time when you need to think. Instead of filling that space with filler words like or well, you can calmly say, "Before we move on, let me explain why this matters," or "let me connect this with something you might already know." Doing this keeps your audience's attention while you organize your thoughts. It's an elegant way to gain a few seconds to formulate your next idea without losing credibility or flow. This is especially useful in high-pressure situations, where you need to keep talking without showing that you're searching for your next words. A well-used transition can be your mental lifeline. In the professional world, those who communicate clearly move forward faster. And that clarity doesn't depend solely on having brilliant ideas, but on guiding them with logic and flow. That's why the conscious use of transition phrases can mean the difference between sounding scattered and sounding like a leader. If you manage to incorporate these expressions into your everyday speech, even in informal conversations, you'll notice that people listen to you more attentively, participate more actively, and respect your opinion more. Why? Because you're not just talking, you're leading a communicative experience where every word has purpose. Train this skill daily. Every time you speak, make an effort to guide the thread of conversation with clear transitions. If you're explaining something out loud, try organizing it with phrases like, "First, I want to show you this. Next, we'll go into this. And finally, I want to leave you with this idea." Do it so often that it becomes second nature, because when the time comes, on camera, in an interview, in a key presentation, there won't be time to improvise structure. You'll need your mind to do it automatically, and that only happens with conscious practice. That way, your speech won't just be heard, it will be understood, remembered, and valued. Because in the end, great ideas need great bridges to arrive with impact. And those bridges are built with transition phrases used with intelligence and purpose. Chapter 13. Verbal Authenticity. How to sound real without losing authority. In a world full of rehearsed speeches, prefabricated phrases, and forced tones, verbal authenticity has become one of the most valuable communication skills you can master. Speaking with authenticity doesn't mean speaking without a filter or saying everything that crosses your mind without thinking of the consequences. It also doesn't mean sounding informal or losing elegance. Rather, it means that your way of communicating aligns with what you truly feel, think, and believe. When you speak, your tone, your words, and your facial expressions are in sync with your inner intention. That congruence is what people perceive as authenticity. And the most powerful part is, you can achieve it without losing authority. In fact, it can strengthen your presence. People can immediately sense when someone is performing rather than communicating. It's obvious when a speaker puts on a mask and changes their way of speaking to sound more important or formal. That disconnect between what's being said and how it's being said creates distrust, even if the content itself is valuable. On the other hand, when someone speaks authentically, from the confidence of their lived experience and beliefs, they project an energy that's hard to fake. They become credible. The key is finding that balance where you can sound natural, relatable, and genuine, without slipping into excessive informality or losing control of your message. Verbal authenticity begins with clarity of intention. Before you speak, ask yourself, why do I want to say this? Where is this coming from? If your intention is genuine, whether it's to help, inspire, connect, or persuade, your voice will naturally align with that purpose. You don't need to force authority when your intention is strong. Speaking with truth doesn't require embellishment. Sometimes, a simple phrase said with real conviction has more impact than brilliant rhetoric empty of emotion. The goal isn't to sound perfect, it's to sound coherent. Your authority doesn't come from a loud voice, but from an authentic voice that reflects internal confidence. To sound real without losing authority, it's important to know and honor your natural communication style. Don't try to copy how someone else speaks. Some people are more measured, others more expressive. Some use humor, others lean on logic. Discover your own style and build from there. If you're naturally empathetic, don't hold back just to sound more serious. If you're reflective, don't force a fast-paced tone to seem more energetic. Your power lies in accepting your style, refining it, and using it strategically. Authenticity is felt when you speak from the root of who you are, not from a costume of who you think you should be. Including personal anecdotes, when relevant, also reinforces your verbal authenticity. It's not about talking about yourself constantly, but about sharing real fragments of your experience that connect with your message. Phrases like, "I had doubts at that moment too," "I learned this the hard way," or "what worked for me was," don't take away from your authority, they enhance it. Because they show that you're not speaking from theory but from lived experience. People respect those who dare to share their real journey, with its mistakes, lessons, and growth, far more than those who speak from an unreachable pedestal. On the flip side, choose your words carefully, but don't over-censor yourself. We often lose authenticity by trying to sound correct. We use overcomplicated phrasing, avoid common expressions, or strip all emotion from our language in an attempt to sound more technical or neutral. But emotion is part of the message. If you're passionate about something, show it. If something surprises you, say so. If a story moved you, share it with that same tone. Your audience doesn't just want to understand what you're saying, they want to feel it. And that only happens if you are also feeling what you're saying. One powerful tool for maintaining authenticity without losing presence is using conscious pauses. Pauses allow you to think, breathe, and give space to your truth before responding. You don't need to speak quickly to sound confident. In fact, people who take their time to think before speaking often come across as more trustworthy. Pauses also give weight to your words. Instead of filling the space with unnecessary phrases, let your ideas breathe. In that silence, your authenticity is reinforced, because you're not competing for attention, you're leading with intention. Lastly, remember that being authentic doesn't mean being perfect or always having the right answer. It means having the courage to speak truthfully, to admit what you don't know, to correct yourself when necessary, and to keep learning. That kind of well-expressed humility doesn't weaken your authority, it elevates it. Because in a world of facades, those who dare to be real shine the brightest. Speak from yourself, with your voice, your story, your mistakes, and your truths. Because when you sound real, you don't just connect, you inspire. And that's the kind of authority that leaves a lasting mark. Chapter 14. The mental confidence that comes from speaking with clarity. Speaking with clarity is not just a technical skill, it's a way to empower yourself mentally. Because when you express yourself clearly, you also think clearly. And when you think clearly, you feel confident. Mental clarity is not an accident. It's the result of training your mind to organize ideas, prioritize what matters, and translate complex thoughts into simple, precise words. That clarity doesn't just improve the way you speak, it shapes the way others perceive you. Confident people aren't those who have all the answers. They're the ones who can explain what they think without confusion or hesitation. And that confidence is built from the inside, not from appearances. Mental confidence in speaking starts with understanding what you truly want to say. We often feel anxious when communicating because our ideas are tangled. We don't know where to start, what to leave out, or how to say things without sounding confusing. That's why the first step to speaking clearly is to internally organize your message. Before speaking, take a mental moment and ask, what's the central idea? What do I want the other person to understand? What examples or words can reinforce this idea? You don't need a script, but you do need a clear mental map. That reduces internal noise and allows you to communicate with confidence, without fear of going blank or veering off course. Another key factor is using simple and direct language. Many people fall into the trap of using jargon, long phrases, or overly complex language to appear more intelligent. But what actually happens is that they obscure the message. Intelligence doesn't lie in sounding complicated. It lies in making the complex sound simple. If you can explain something complex using simple words, that is mental clarity. And that earns respect. Speaking clearly doesn't mean speaking like a child. It means speaking like someone who has processed their message and owns it. Clarity isn't empty simplicity. It's conscious precision. It's not about saying more, but saying it better. Less decoration, more intention. Clarity also brings calm to your audience. When you speak clearly, the other person doesn't have to work hard to understand you. They relax, follow you, and trust you. And you relax too, because you can feel your message is flowing. This creates a virtuous circle of mutual confidence. Mental chaos creates verbal chaos. But when your ideas are organized, your tone softens, your body calms, your rhythm steadies. A clear mind produces a confident voice. And that can be felt. Because true confidence is not arrogance, volume, or aggression. It's inner calm projected through words. To develop this kind of mental confidence, practicing structured speaking is essential. For example, you can apply the three-part technique: main idea, justification, and example. This way, whenever you need to explain something, you're not improvising into the void, you have a mental pattern to follow. This reduces anxiety, speeds up your response, and increases coherence. Another powerful strategy is to speak in short sentences. Instead of constructing a never-ending idea with 10 connectors, express it in blocks. One idea. Period. Another idea. Period. This gives rhythm to your message and helps each idea breathe and be better understood. You also need to train your mind to spot what's unnecessary. We often confuse clarity with abundance. But saying too much can be just as harmful as saying too little. Clarity requires synthesis. Constantly ask yourself, does this part add or distract? Does this detail help or complicate? Eliminate the redundant. If you can say it in 5 words, don't use 20. That ability to edit in real time is what separates an average speaker from a powerful communicator. Because it's not just about knowing what to say, it's about knowing what not to say. And that requires mental maturity and verbal mastery. Another essential tool for projecting clarity is eye contact. When you look at the person you're speaking to, you don't just connect emotionally. You also force your mind to organize itself. Eye contact anchors you in the present moment, keeps you from drifting into your thoughts, and grounds you in the now. That presence demands clarity, because you know you're being listened to in real time. Moreover, eye contact conveys confidence even when you're not speaking. It's a silent affirmation that you know what you're saying and don't need to hide behind your words. And don't underestimate the power of breathing. We often speak anxiously because we're not breathing properly. Shallow or rapid breathing results in fast, nervous, or disorganized speech. The mind needs oxygen to think clearly. So before speaking, take a deep breath. Pause. Oxygenate your brain. That pause allows you to align your thoughts, structure your message, and begin with sharper focus. Speaking from breath control gives you a major advantage over those who improvise on impulse. Because clarity isn't about speed, it's about direction. Finally, mental confidence in speaking also grows through the habit of listening to yourself. Record yourself. Listen. Observe your patterns. Do you rely on filler words? Do you get tangled in your thoughts? Do you tend to ramble? All of that can be fixed. But first, you need to see it. Verbal self-awareness is one of the most powerful tools for speaking clearly. Because once you know how you sound, you can choose how you want to sound. You can adjust your rhythm, your tone, your pauses, your structure. Speaking clearly isn't a talent reserved for a few. It's a skill you train. And by training it, you don't just improve how you communicate, you transform how you think. Clarity, ultimately, is a form of respect. Respect for yourself, because you honor your ideas by expressing them precisely. And respect for others, because you allow them to understand you effortlessly. Speaking clearly is not just a technique, it's a silent act of power, a gesture of calm authority, a sign of inner control. Because those who think with order speak with power, and those who speak with power transform. Chapter 15. How to craft responses that leave a mark. A powerful response isn't just one that gives the right information. It's one that leaves a mark. One that pauses the other person's thinking, forces them to look at things from a different angle, and creates an emotional, cognitive, or even transformational impact. It's not just about answering. It's about crafting a response that the other person remembers. A response that's hard to ignore. And to achieve that, you need more than facts. You need structure, intention, emotion, and above all, human connection. When someone asks you a question, especially in an important conversation, what they're often seeking isn't just a literal answer. They're looking for clarity, confidence, guidance, or even emotional validation. That's why an effective response begins by fully listening to the question. Don't reply with the first thing that comes to mind. Listen not just to what the person says, but how they say it. Is there hesitation in their voice? Uncertainty? Curiosity? Anxiety? Each emotion gives you a clue about the type of response that will be most impactful. Then, before opening your mouth, organize your intention. Ask yourself, what do I want to trigger with my response? Do I want to inspire, calm, challenge, clarify, motivate? Not every answer has to be sweet, but every answer should have direction. Because if you're just speaking to fill silence, your message will likely get lost. But if you speak with intention, even a short sentence can have a lasting effect. Clarity of purpose when speaking is the difference between a generic comment and an unforgettable response. Structure is also essential. Responses that leave a mark follow an internal logic. They don't need to be long, but they do need to be coherent. A simple yet powerful structure is validation, core idea, example or metaphor, and memorable close. Validating the other person creates connection. Presenting your idea clearly fosters understanding. Using a story or image reinforces the message, and ending with a rounded phrase makes it memorable. When you master this sequence, you can speak on any topic with depth and impact. The power of a good analogy cannot be overstated. If you can compare a complex idea to a simple, concrete image, your response sticks in the other person's mind. Metaphors are vehicles of deep understanding. Don't just say, "You have to be patient in business." Say, "Starting a business is like planting a tree. At first you don't see anything, but all the magic is happening underground." That kind of response isn't just understood. It's felt. And that's why it's unforgettable. Additionally, responses that leave a mark don't shy away from silence. They know how to use it. When you finish speaking, don't rush to fill the space with more words. Let your message breathe. Sometimes, a pause after a powerful sentence gives the other person time to absorb it. People don't just hear what you say, they feel how you say it. A response delivered with calm, presence, and respect carries far more weight than one that's rushed or anxious. Of course, authenticity is key. If your response sounds rehearsed, exaggerated, or forced, it loses power. But if it comes from your real experience, from your sincere voice, without trying to impress, it connects more deeply. The secret isn't to sound brilliant, it's to sound real. You can say something as simple as, "I went through that too, and what I learned is that the most valuable thing you can do is not give up." And if you say it from your truth, it can have more impact than an entire speech. Another powerful tool is the use of questions within your answer. Instead of delivering a closed conclusion, you can open the other person's thinking by asking, "What if what you're avoiding is exactly what you need to face?" Rhetorical or strategic questions spark critical thinking and make the other person engage actively with your message. When you involve the other person, instead of just talking at them, your response becomes an experience, not just an opinion. And remember, the most lasting responses are not always the most elaborate, but the ones that touch something deep in the other person. Sometimes a response that contains an uncomfortable truth, spoken with empathy, can change someone's life. Saying, "I think what's hardest for you isn't making the decision. It's accepting who you'll become after it," isn't a technical phrase, but it can open a huge emotional door. Because it touches a nerve. Because it's loaded with meaning. Mastering the art of responding isn't about talking more or sounding better. It's about learning to see what the other person needs to hear, beyond what they're asking. It's about becoming someone who not only replies, but transforms through the way they speak. Because when your responses are filled with awareness, presence, and purpose, you don't need to shout or prove anything. Your message becomes a tool for change. And that is what leaves a mark. Conclusion: respond, don't react. Turn your agile mind into your daily superpower. When you learn to respond instead of reacting, you become truly powerful. Because while most people are trapped by their impulses, you choose every word with intention. While others get swept away by the emotions of the moment, you stand in clarity. This isn't just a communication habit, it's a way of life. An agile mind is not one that answers quickly, but one that answers wisely. It filters before speaking, breathes before acting, sees the whole field before making a move. And when this agility becomes part of your daily routine, every conversation turns into an opportunity to connect, influence, and lead. Mastering the art of response is far more than speaking intelligently. It's training your mind to see beyond the obvious. It's the ability to detect hidden intentions, emotional patterns, and power dynamics. And instead of reacting like everyone else, you choose the most effective path. Not the easiest, not the fastest, but the smartest. That's what separates those who are dragged by circumstances from those who take control of them. Those who live at the mercy of their environment from those who become architects of their own reality. This book has not only given you practical tools to think faster, communicate clearly, and act with confidence. It has reminded you of something essential. You can reprogram your mind. You can turn impulse into intention, anxiety into focus, and insecurity into wisdom. But this doesn't happen overnight. It's a daily practice. Every conversation is a chance to sharpen your mind. Every interaction is an invitation to become more conscious. Every challenge, a possibility to respond from your best self, not your reactive self. In a world that rewards superficial speed, you choose deep speed, the kind that comes from internal mastery. It's not about slowing down, but about deciding with clarity, even when things move fast. Because thinking fast doesn't mean speaking without thinking. It means thinking deeply in a short time. And that's achieved by training your attention, your focus, your emotional sensitivity. Responding with power isn't about force, it's about precision. Like a well-aimed arrow. Like a word that opens doors. Like a silence that speaks louder than 1,000 phrases. True power lies in not losing yourself in the chaos. In holding your center even when pushed to the extremes. In preserving your voice when everyone else is shouting. That's why when you choose to respond instead of react, you're choosing freedom. You're choosing leadership. You're choosing awareness. Because you don't need to prove anything if you know who you are. You don't need to win arguments if you can earn respect. You don't need to speak louder if you can speak clearer. Your power doesn't lie in your speed, it lies in your depth. Make this practice your lifestyle. Observe before speaking. Listen more than you think you should. Choose the words that build, that open, that elevate. And when you feel the urgency to react, give yourself one more second. That second can be the difference between repeating your past or redirecting your future. Between damaging a relationship or strengthening it. Between acting from ego or acting from wisdom. That second is the space where your real power is born. Your mind can be your best ally or your worst saboteur. It depends on who you give control to, your reaction or your response. And if there's one thing that's become clear after these hours of reflection, it's that you have more power than you think. You don't need to be perfect to speak with power. You just need to be conscious. Every day, every conversation, every decision is a new opportunity to use your agile mind as a daily superpower. One that doesn't shout, but transforms. One that doesn't dominate with force, but with intelligence. One that doesn't respond to be right, but to build a meaningful life. Because in the end, it's not what happens to you that defines your life, it's how you respond. And if you respond with clarity, intention, empathy, and power, you'll be creating a version of yourself that not only expresses better but lives better. You don't become influential by talking more. You become influential because when you speak, everything changes. Respond with intelligence. Respond with purpose. Respond as someone who knows that every word is a seed. Because it is. And when you learn to plant them with mastery, you harvest deeper relationships, greater opportunities, and a life that reflects your true greatness. So, if this audiobook inspired you and you're ready to keep deepening your personal growth and inner transformation, I invite you to discover another powerful audiobook that will change how you see the world, your decisions, and your full potential. Click now. I'll see you there.